Europe isn't regulating cybersecurity, it's re-architecting it. Most cybersecurity regulation announcements barely register with engineers. They usually translate into more paperwork, more audits, and very little change to how systems are actually built. But what the European Commission has just proposed is different. This package is not incremental, it is structural. And for startups operating in the UK and EU, it is time-sensitive. At the centre of the announcement are two moves: a revised Cybersecurity Act targeted amendments to the NIS2 directive. On paper, this looks like regulatory refinement. In practice, it marks a shift away from fragmented, checklist-driven compliance toward integrated, auditable security systems that regulators can reason about across borders, vendors, and supply chains. This is no longer a future problem. For EU-facing companies, it is a near-term operating reality. The most important change is how cybersecurity risk is now defined. It is no longer limited to vulnerabilities in application code or misconfigurations in infrastructure. The revised Cybersecurity Act explicitly brings ICT supply chains into scope. That includes open-source dependencies, upstream maintainers, ecosystem manipulation, and exposure to third-country risk security is now evaluated at the system level, not just the component level. In practical terms, it runs is no longer enough. It is resilient, explainable, and trustworthy is the new baseline. This creates a practical challenge for DevSecOps teams. You cannot demonstrate supply chain security without first having supply chain visibility. Under NIS2 and the Cyber Resilience Act, regulators are not just asking whether vulnerabilities exist, they are asking where dependencies come from, how risk accumulates across ecosystems, and whether organizations can reason about that risk over time. Static evidence and point-in-time scans struggle to answer those questions. This is where the shift becomes architectural. Traditional security workflows optimize for finding issues. The EU's new posture optimizes for explaining and defending risk decisions. That means understanding dependency, drift spotting abandoned or manipulated packages, recognizing exploitability signals before CVEs land, and producing evidence that survives audit scrutiny. In other words, the problem space is moving from detection to reasoned assurance. This direction is reinforced by the expanded role of ENISA. ENISA is moving beyond guidance into coordinated incident response, unified reporting, and cross-border supervisory support. This signals a future where security evidence must be consistent, comparable, and audit-ready by default. Cybersecurity is being treated less as a local technical concern and more as a shared operational responsibility. As this shift becomes concrete, teams are responding in two distinct ways. The first is to assemble a traditional toolchain. SIFT for SPOM generation, GRIPE for vulnerability scanning, SNIC for threat intelligence and policy enforcement. This approach works, but it comes with real trade-offs. Over a 2-year horizon, licensing and operational costs for this stack often reach $25,000, $30,000, driven largely by enterprise-tier security tooling, plus the hidden cost of integration and maintenance. As regulatory expectations rise, those inefficiencies become harder to justify. The second approach, increasingly seen among UK and EU-focused startups, is the adoption of integrated supply chain platforms that treat SBOM generation, vulnerability correlation, and compliance evidence as a single workflow. One example of this category is Trace AI, developed by Cerberus.ai. For comparable startup footprints, its repo-based pricing model typically lands closer to $2,000, $4,000 over 2 years, while reducing operational overhead and accelerating readiness for NIS2 and Cyber Resilience Act audits. The important point here is not the product itself, it is the direction of optimization. As Europe raises the bar, the advantage shifts toward teams that can simplify security operations while strengthening audit defensibility. Europe is not asking startups to buy more tools. It is asking them to prove they understand their software supply chain, and the way teams answer that question will increasingly determine how fast they can ship, sell, and scale in the UK and EU. This is the inflection point to watch. Because Europe is not just regulating cybersecurity, it is redesigning how it works.